Don Pablo Escobar.
Don Pablo Escobar.
Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on 1 December 1949 in Rio Negro, Antioquia Department. He was the third of 7 children and grew up in poverty in the neighboring city of Medellin. His father was a small farmer and his mother was a teacher. Escobar left high school in 1966, just before his 17th birthday, before returning 2 years later with his cousin Gustavo Gaviria. At this time, the hard life on the streets of Medellin had polished them into gangster bullies in the eyes of teachers. The two dropped out of school after more than a year, but Escobar, who did not give up, briefly became autonomous in Latin America by forging high school diplomas. He then studied in college with the goal of becoming a criminal lawyer, a politician, and eventually the president, but had to give up because of lack of money. Was a Colombian drug lord, narco-terrorist, and politician who was the founder and sole leader of the Medellin cartel. Dubbed the King of Cocaine, Escobar was one of the wealthiest criminals in history, having amassed an estimated net worth of $30 billion by the time of his death, equivalent to $70 billion as of 2022. While his drug cartel monopolized the cocaine trade into the United States in the 1980s and early 1990s, Escobar started his criminal career with his gang by stealing tombstones, sandblasting their inscriptions, and reselling them. After dropping out of school, Escobar began to join gangs to steal cars. Escobar soon became involved in violent crime, employing criminals to kidnap people who owed him money and demand ransoms, sometimes tearing up ransom notes, even when Escobar had received the ransom. His most famous kidnapping victim was businessman Diego Echevarria, who was kidnapped and eventually killed in the summer of 1971. Escobar received a $50,000 ransom from the Echevarria family. His gang became well known for this kidnapping. Escobar had been involved in organized crime for a decade when the cocaine trade began to spread in Colombia in the mid-1970s. In 1976, Escobar founded the Medellin cartel, which distributed powder cocaine and established the first smuggling routes from Peru. Escobar's meteoric rise caught the attention of the Colombian Security Service ICE, who arrested him in May 1976 on his return from drug trafficking in Ecuador. DES agents found 39 kg of cocaine in the spare tire of Escobar managed to change the first judge in the lawsuit and bribe the second judge, so he was released along with other prisoners. The following year, the agent who arrested Escobar was assassinated. Escobar continued to bribe and intimidate Colombian law enforcement agencies in the same his carrot-and-stick strategy of bribing public officials and political candidates in Colombia, in addition to sending hitmen to murder the ones who rejected his bribes, came to be known as silver or lead, meaning money or death. The Medellin cartel and the Cali cartel both managed to bribe Colombian politicians and campaigned for both the conservative and liberal parties. Hence, Escobar and many other Colombian drug lords were pulling strings in every level of the Colombian government, because many of the political candidates whom they backed financially were eventually elected. Although the Medellin cartel was only established in the early 1970s, it expanded after Escobar met several drug lords on a farm in April 1978, and by the end of 1978, they had transported some 19,000 kilograms of cocaine to the United States. Soon, the demand for cocaine greatly increased in the United States, which led to Escobar organizing more smuggling shipments, routes, and distribution networks in South Florida, California, Puerto Rico, and other parts of the country. He and cartel co-founder Carlos led worked together to develop a new transshipment point in the Bahamas, an island called Norman's Cay, about 350 km, 220 mi. Southeast of the Florida coast. Escobar and Robert Vesco purchased most of the land on the island, which included a 1 kilometer 3,300 ft airstrip, a harbor, a hotel, houses, boats, and aircraft, and they built a refrigerated warehouse to store the cocaine. According to his brother, Escobar did not purchase Norman's Cay. It was instead a sole venture of letters. From 1978 to 1982, this was used as a central smuggling route for the Medellin cartel. With the enormous profits generated by this route, Escobar was also involved in philanthropy in Colombia and paid handsomely for the staff of his cocaine lab. Escobar spent millions developing some of Medellin's poorest neighborhoods. He built housing complexes, parks, football stadiums, hospitals, schools, and churches. Escobar also entered politics in the 1980s and participated in and supported the formation of the Liberal Party of Colombia. In 1982, he successfully entered the Colombian Congress. Although only an alternate, he was automatically granted parliamentary immunity and the right to a diplomatic passport under Colombian law. At the same time, Escobar was gradually becoming a public figure, and because of his charitable work, he was known as Robin Hood Paisa. He alleged once in an interview that his fortune came from a bicycle rental company he founded when he was 16 years old. In Congress, the new Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, had become Escobar's opponent, accusing Escobar of criminal activity from the very first day of Congress. Escobar's arrest in 1976 was investigated by Lara Bonilla's subordinates. Escobar fought back. He announced his retirement from politics in January 1984. 3 months later, Lara Bonilla was murdered. The Colombian judiciary had been a target of Escobar throughout the mid-1980s. While bribing and murdering several judges, in the fall of 1985, the wanted Escobar requested the Colombian government to allow his conditional surrender without extradition to the United States. The proposal was initially answered in the negative, and Escobar subsequently founded and implicitly supported the Los Extraditable Organization, which aims to fight extradition policy. The Los Extraditable Organization was subsequently accused of participating in an effort to prevent the Colombian Supreme Court from studying the constitutionality of Colombia's extradition treaty with the United States. In support of the 6 November 1985 far-left guerrilla movement that attacked the Colombian Judiciary building and killed half of the justices of the Supreme Court. In late 1986, Colombia's Supreme Court declared the previous extradition treaty illegal due to being signed by a presidential delegation, not the president. Escobar's victory over the judiciary was short-lived, with new President Virgilio Barco Vargas having quickly renewed his agreement with the United States. Escobar still held a grudge against Luis Carlos Galen for kicking him out of politics, so Galen was assassinated on 18 August 1989 at Escobar's orders. Escobar then planted a bomb on Avianca Flight 203 in an attempt to assassinate Galen's successor, Cesar Gaviria Trujillo, who missed the plane and survived. All 107 people were killed in the blast. Because 2 Americans were also killed in the bombing, the U.S. government began to intervene directly. After the assassination of Luis Carlos Galen, the administration of Cesar Gaviria moved against Escobar and the drug cartels. Eventually, the government negotiated with Escobar and convinced him to surrender and cease all criminal activity in exchange for a reduced sentence and preferential treatment during his captivity, declaring an end to a series of previous violent acts meant to pressure authorities and public opinion. Escobar surrendered to Colombian authorities in 1991. Before he gave himself up, the extradition of Colombian citizens to the United States had been prohibited by the newly approved Colombian Constitution of 1991. This act was controversial, as it was suspected that Escobar and other drug lords had influenced members of the Constituent Assembly in passing the law. Escobar was confined in what became his own luxurious private prison, La Catedral, which featured a football pitch, a giant dollhouse, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a waterfall. Accounts of Escobar's continued criminal activities while in prison began to surface in the media, which prompted the government to attempt to move him to a more conventional jail on 22 July 1992. Escobar's influence allowed him to discover the plan in advance and make a successful escape, spending the remainder of his life evading the police. Escobar faced threats from the Colombian police, the US government, and his rival, the Cali cartel. On 2 December 1993, Escobar was found in a house in a middle-class residential area of Medellin by Colombian special forces using technology provided by the United States. Police tried to arrest Escobar, but the situation quickly escalated to an exchange of gunfire. Escobar was shot and killed while trying to escape from the roof. He was hit by bullets in the torso and feet, and a bullet which struck him in the head. This sparked debate about whether he killed himself or whether he was shot and killed.